When you think of heavy weapons in Splatoon, what weapon do you think of? Many may think of the Hydra Splatling, or even the Heavy Splatling, which isn't actually a heavyweight by the way. Others may think of something like the E-Liter, but when I think of heavy weapons, only one weapon comes to mind, the Dynamo Roller. This weapon is just slow in pretty much every area, slow firing shots and slow movement. So to offset these major weaknesses, surely Dynamo has some outstanding positives, right? Well, no. Sure, it has an okay range one-shot and maybe some zone cheese for a nice burst paint, but that's it. This weapon's damage is super inconsistent, and even its paint, which is supposed to be decent, it can be even more inconsistent. And also, this roller is the only roller which might actually not want a vertical flick. Carbon and regular roller like it for range, Big Swig likes it for stronger damage, and we don't even need to talk about Flingza. But Dynamo's vertical flick might be one of the worst moves in the entire game. This weapon lacks strengths to make up for its weaknesses, which, you know, is how weapons are supposed to be designed in this game. Oh, and on top of all of that, Dynamo has a kit that actually isn't half bad for Dynamo, but tactical being almost irrelevant doesn't help its case. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoy this weapon quite a bit, but with its lack of worthwhile strength, I always end up just wanting to play a way better weapon. But what if I told you this wasn't always the case, and that Dynamo was a lot better in previous games? Okay, I lied, it's only better in one game. Splatoon 2, well, yeah, you could run damage up with MPU to effectively increase its range, and it arguably had better kits. The main weapon itself didn't have squid rolling, which helps it a ton in Splatoon 3, and this special was a thing. No, Dynamo was actually good in Splatoon 1. This weapon, well, it didn't have the best kits in the game. The weapon was actually balanced. Sure, Dynamo did have worse ink efficiency, but in Splatoon 1 it didn't have a vertical flick, and its paint and damage were far more consistent. Not to mention you could run damage up to increase the consistency of this damage. This weapon was actually balanced to be a glass cannon, trading actually overwhelming power for being insanely slow. This was not only the best roller in Splatoon 1, but one of the better main weapons in Splatoon 1. Only held back really by the need for damage up and the kits not being the best. But Nintendo apparently did not like this, along with pretty much every Splatoon 1 high tier except for Bucket for some reason. Dynamo received massive nerfs in the transition from Splatoon 1 to 2. It seems that Nintendo tried to buff the weapon a little to compensate, including an ink efficiency buff from Splatoon 1 to 2. But the weapon just doesn't feel the same as it did in Splatoon 1, almost making Splatoon 2 Dynamo feel like a rework of the Splatoon 1 Dynamo. And Nintendo trying to buff its weaknesses and nerf the positives, while this sounds like a good idea, is actually what killed the weapon. But who knows, maybe Nintendo will eventually realize that Dynamo is really bad and buff it back to its former glory, although I have a feeling they won't do this until it gets its gold Dynamo kit. Well, thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end, and for 1,000 subscribers, my name is CATLOAFMAN, and I will see you in the next one.